To get some insider insights into Uzbekistan's capital markets and stock exchange, we're here to meet George Paresishvili, the CEO of the Tashkent Stock Exchange. You started out here in about 2022. You joined the stock exchange in September. And over these last few years, what can you tell us about the state of affairs for the market?
Over the 1.5 years that I have been at the stock exchange, I have seen significant developments. Liquidity in terms of number of trades improved dramatically. When I joined Tashkent Stock Exchange, we had approximately 300 trades per day. Now we have well over 2,000 per day. Trading volumes, they are quite volatile. Sometimes they increase dramatically, sometimes we don't have much trading going on, which is very typical to any frontier market. It's not very atypical to see any very small trading volumes in such markets, and Uzbekistan is one of such markets. But overall, I can tell you that the depth of the market has increased. The pool of investors who are investing in Uzbek market is increasing, and we expect that to increase even more after we bring big international players to our market. I mean large global central securities depositories, international ones such as ClearStream, and also global custodian banks like Citi, JP Morgan, Bank of Georgia, Bank of New York Mellon, State Street. So we hope once they are here, they will basically open the door to many more foreign investors who would love to invest in Uzbek market.
And do you have like timeline for when they would be entering?
We started working with them in early 2023, I believe it was January, and the work has been going on non-stop, and I hope that we will see them by the end of this year, 2024.
And how would that then impact the stock exchange here?
Of course, it will have a significant impact. I will give you one example. In 2013-14, when Russia has established direct links with ICSDs such as Euroclear and ClearStream, the share of non-resident investors in Russian equity market increased, I believe, from 5% to 25%, almost immediately. So that makes a big difference, because once the infrastructure is there, then pretty much any foreign investor who is comfortable with Uzbek risk, they can buy and hold securities in Uzbekistan. So you remove one big barrier for them for entry. So yeah, I expect significant developments after we do that.
And before coming here, you were previously the CEO of the Georgian Stock Exchange.
That is correct.
How do you see Uzbekistan's situation compared to Georgia?
Uzbekistan is much bigger market than Georgia, definitely. It's a big country, not just in terms of population, economy, and potential-wise, I would say it's even bigger. I mean, what I see is that Uzbekistan still has a lot of room to grow. There are many untapped opportunities in banking sector, in financial sector, and also in many other sectors of the economy. Georgian market is more mature. There is a bigger penetration, especially in financial sector. I mean, almost every citizen of Georgia is banked, which is not the case in Uzbekistan. And that's why I think there is a much bigger potential in Uzbekistan than in Georgia, because there is a lot of underserved population and even companies. They are not getting yet as many services as you would normally expect. And capital market has to play its own role in terms of access to capital for those Uzbek businesses which currently cannot get enough funding when they need it.
And speaking of the capital market, it's a lot of people I've heard recently have been talking about it feels a bit stalled. It had a lot of progress in the early 2018, 2019, and then last year or so, a lot of the privatization efforts that were in place faced quite a few setbacks, especially in terms of the banks. They keep pushing back the deadlines for the privatization. Do you have any insights into why that is happening?
Well, one of the biggest drivers of the development of the capital market, especially equity market, is of course privatization and IPOs of state-owned companies, simply because the stake of state-owned companies, or the share of state-owned companies in Uzbek economy is still very large by international standards. Let's say banking sector, still close to 70% of all banking assets are concentrated in state-owned banks, and also in other sectors of the economy like energy, etc. Mining, it's still predominantly state-owned companies. So, of course, when you have a structure of economy as such, then obviously these companies will be the drivers of the growth for the capital market once they get privatized and once they get IPO'd on the local stock exchange. And as you rightfully mentioned, there were several plans for IPOs of these large state-owned companies and banks, and the deadlines have been pushed down the road for many reasons. I think one of the main reasons why these IPOs haven't materialized yet is that the government is cognizant of the fact that many of these large state-owned companies and banks are not really ready to go public. They still have to do a lot of work in terms of improving their corporate governance, transparency of their financial statements. They need to fully adopt international financial reporting standards, become much more transparent, etc., etc., and more efficient as businesses. And it is not surprising for state-owned company to be less efficient than privately owned. We have seen it in almost every country in the world, that once the company gets privatized and is in private hands, it becomes more efficient, which makes it, of course, more attractive for equity investors. So I think the Uzbek government is very, cautious about when they want to sell the assets to the public. They want to sell them at a good price, and because they realize that many of these companies are not ready yet, they prefer to maybe delay an IPO to make things better, to improve the corporate governance and all these other things which I mentioned. And when they feel that companies are ready, then they will probably be more forthcoming in terms of IPOing these companies on the stock exchange.
And I look forward to that happening soon, and I know many other investors are keen for that.
We keep getting inquiries almost non-stop all the time from all quarters of the world, asking when these IPOs are happening, which will be the first company, which will be the second. And of course, it's difficult to say now how the process will evolve. There has been a new presidential decree, number 163, number 162, which now has a list of companies which need to be privatized.
The 12 main ones.
12 names on the local market, and I think 5 names on the international market. It is possible that we will see dual listing, so that, let's say, large state-owned company of Uzbekistan will be listed, their shares will be listed both on the local stock exchange, on our exchange, and maybe another portion will be listed on the international exchange.
Because right now there's no local companies listed on any international exchanges.
That is correct. Not any equity. No equity. There are a couple of bonds, euro bonds, issued by large state-owned quasi-sovereign companies and banks. But you are right, there is no equity, or there is no stock from Uzbekistan listed on any of the major international exchanges.
Do you have any insights on when perhaps that would happen?
Again, it's a part of the same process. As you would imagine, listing requirements on large international exchange, like, for example, London Stock Exchange or Euronext or New York Stock Exchange, are even stricter than on the local stock exchange. So these companies, if they are not ready, they do not qualify for listing on the local stock exchange, then you can bet that they do not qualify on the international exchange as well. So it's the same process. So the homework needs to be done regardless whether this company needs to be listed on the local exchange or on the international exchange. And I would argue that listing on the international exchange is even more difficult. So they better be prepared.
Are there any prospects for companies that are currently listed in the local exchange being listed in other regional exchanges like in Kazakhstan?
It's a choice of any issuer. Obviously, they can choose to list on another exchange. We are trying to stay competitive in terms of listing venue to be attractive to them. It's our job.
Yeah.
But certainly, I mean, nobody prohibits a local company from going to another exchange if they want to.
And then what are the biggest challenges that the exchange market is facing right now?
The biggest challenge is probably the lack of liquidity, because that's very detrimental to any stock exchange business. Investors don't like market which is illiquid, which is hard to trade. Another thing is, again, a lack of proper corporate governance and transparency for locally listed companies, which makes it, again, a little bit more risky for investors to invest in such securities. Also, an impediment is sometimes lack of the regulation and laws which conform to international standards. I mean, don't get me wrong, there are many laws in Uzbekistan which regulate capital market. There is a securities market law, there is a law on joint stock companies, there is a law on stock exchanges, etc. And there are also many more bylaws and regulations which also cover securities market. But there are some gaps which we're trying to fix along the way as quickly as we can. For example, until very recently, there was no notion of foreign nominal ownership, which is a very significant concept for any foreign investor to enter any market. And we introduced this concept of foreign nominal ownership through a regulatory sandbox regime, which was set up by the Presidential Decree 291 in September of 2023. So we tried to move things faster by introducing this regulatory sandbox regime, and it works. And we already see significant uptick in interest from international investors because of that.
And then let's quickly move on to opportunities. You previously touched on them, but what do you think would be the biggest draw for international investors coming here?
I think low valuations, because companies are still relatively cheap in comparison to international peers, which is again understandable. Like I said, it's illiquid market, it's frontier market. There are lots of economic and political risks involved whenever investors invest in frontier markets, and Uzbekistan in that sense is no exception. That's all priced in terms of really low valuations. I think once Uzbekistan opens up more to international investors and the local capital market is developed and the liquidity improves, obviously we expect valuations to increase. And I think for investors who are willing to venture into frontier markets, it can be a very, very nice opportunity to make a significant return. Because if you come at the right time, if you invest early at these low valuations, and if you're patient enough to wait until all these necessary reforms are enacted and they bring their fruit, and you can see that in improved prices, then you can make a really, really good money. And we have seen this in many, many other frontier markets. Of course, this strategy is not without the risk. Sometimes you have to be, again, really patient, and you have to wait much longer than you originally thought. But in general, again, I cannot say that it works everywhere, but in general it works. Eventually, this strategy pays off, in most cases.
And it seems quite optimistic for Uzbekistan.
Yes, because Uzbek government and the president, they are doing many reforms. As you mentioned, in 2017-18, we had a significant growth because the new president, after he became to power, he enacted many, many very serious and significant reforms, like currency liberalization, etc., many other things. And those first wave of reforms have brought its own results. And now we are at the stage of enacting second round of reforms, which are much deeper. These are structural reforms,
More
which
complex.
are, in a way, more difficult to do because some of these reforms are painful. Let's take removal of subsidies for energy sector.
Yeah.
As you know, the government in October of last year decided to lift tariffs on electricity and gas for commercial consumers, and now from May of this year they did the same for residential consumers, and prices were increased twofold, in some cases threefold.
Yeah.
And that, of course, was painful both for businesses and for now for residential investors. And most likely it will result in higher inflation. So that's why these reforms are difficult and they are not easy to enact. The easier reforms have been done. Now it's time for doing more difficult reforms. And again, I am very satisfied and happy that the government, I see a lot of drive and willingness on part of the government and the president to go through these painful reforms. Because I think there is a very good understanding on the top level of the government and the president's administration that country needs to continue on this path of reforms. We cannot stop.
And you cannot just either go back.
No way for reversing these reforms because A, nobody will accept it, and B, it's going to be just detrimental to the economy. I mean, how you can, for example, reverse the currency liberalization? It's going to kill all the business. Nobody wants to go back to the days where people could not buy currency. There were several different exchange rates, one official that nobody could really rely on, another black market rate, which was unofficial. Nobody wants to go back to those days because now people got used to actually going to a bank, converting their currency, through official ways, etc. And there is one exchange rate everywhere.
Yeah.
This is how it should be.
And do you have any projects that are in the pipeline?
We want to develop bond market. Currently, our exchange is predominantly equity driven. To give you an example, in terms of numbers, out of 105 issuers that we have in the listing of Tashkent Stock Exchange, 100 are, or more than 100 are equity issuers, and only a handful of them are bond issuers. We see a big potential for bond issuances. We think that Uzbek companies should be thinking of financing their growth not only through equity issue or by simply going to their shareholders asking them for more money, but they should be utilizing issuance of bonds, corporate bonds, for getting debt financing. And they should get used to the fact that banks are not the only providers of the debt financing. So when you're considering taking a bank loan, you should always keep in mind that there is a possibility to issue a bond in the market and to raise debt in that way. We also think that there is a significant potential for issuing bonds in hard currency, not only local currency. For one simple reason, there are still many investors, including local ones, who prefer to invest in hard currency. They don't want to take currency risk for historical or some other reasons. You can sit and wait until they become comfortable taking a local currency risk, or you can say, look, if there is a demand for securities issued in hard currency, let's make it happen. Let's allow local companies to issue securities in hard currency so that this supply of securities in hard currency is met with a sufficient demand, which is there. We definitely see a demand for currency securities. I mean, you can look at the deposit base in banks. Predominantly, retail deposits are dollar-based. And there is even more money apparently sitting in the mattress, under the mattress, in hard currency, predominantly in dollars. So we want that money, which is now sitting under the mattress, to come out and start working.
And actually be part of
the financial system, because that creates more liquidity in the market, that creates more financing opportunities for Uzbek companies, which eventually leads to more economic growth and new job creation.
Then how do you get that money from out of the mattress?
Well, you need to offer people and companies attractive investments.
Yeah.
There is no magic and there is no silver bullet for that. You just need to show them a product, investment product, which they like. And if they say that they would love to invest in dollar-denominated bonds, for example, then you should be able to sell them dollar-denominated bonds.
And giving them that trust.
Giving them simply the instrument which they prefer. If an investor says, whether it's a local investor or foreigner, that they are not at this point of time willing to accept currency risk and they would rather keep their savings or investments in dollars, okay, you can argue for a long time that for them investing in local currency is more attractive because interest rates are higher, etc., etc. But you know, some people are afraid of devaluation risk, currency devaluation risks. Others are afraid of inflation, that high inflation may eat up their returns in Uzbek soums, etc. There are many reasons why there are some people who would not invest in local currency, period. So what we are saying that let's meet that demand for dollar-denominated securities with the supply.
Yeah.
And let's allow Uzbek companies to issue bonds in dollars when they see a demand. Yeah. And currently, the law does not allow that, and we are working with the regulator to basically to make it happen.
To make it a possibility.
To make it a possibility for local issuers to issue bonds in dollars.
And do you have any closing statements?
All I can say is that I can tell investors that stay tuned. Things are evolving, things are developing really fast, and hopefully we will have some really good news by the end of this year, if not earlier, in terms of connectivity of Uzbekistan to international markets, and in terms of depth of and breadth of financial instruments which are available in Uzbekistan.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Thank you. You are most welcome.